He adjusts his expensive silk tie, smirking at her across the courtroom. "She's nothing," he tells the judge, his voice dripping with contempt. "A simple housewife who contributed nothing to our marriage. She'll be lucky to get a dime." His mistress laughs from the back row. But the man Gabriel Cox has made a fatal mistake. He thinks he's divorcing a dependent. He doesn't realize he's in a legal battle with a titan. And he definitely doesn't realize that the judge presiding over his case just read about his nothing wife on the cover of Forbes. The courtroom was cold. It wasn't just the overworked air conditioning humming aggressively in the high ceilings of courtroom 3B. It was a bone-deep chill that seeped into Beverly Ignacio's skin, a cold she had lived with for the last 2 years of her 10-year marriage. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her spine straight. Her attorney, Lena Benton, a sharp woman with a gaze that missed nothing, sat beside her, a single, perfectly organized file on the table before them. Across the room, her soon-to-be ex-husband, Gabriel Cox, was the exact opposite. He couldn't sit still. He bounced his knee. He whispered to his lawyer, Robert Snyder. He checked his phone, silencing it with an annoyed huff when the bailiff shot him a look. He looked bored, impatient, as if this entire proceeding was a bureaucratic hassle preventing him from getting to his afternoon golf game. In the back row, a young woman with bleached blonde hair and a dress that was too tight and too bright for a divorce court proceeding, Tiffany Shaw, watched with a smug, predatory grin. Every time Greg looked back at her, she'd blow him a tiny, mocking kiss. Beverly focused on a crack in the plaster above the judge's bench. She breathed in, counted to 4. She breathed out, counted to 6. It was a meditation technique she'd learned to survive the shouting, to survive the gaslighting, to survive being called nothing so many times, she'd almost started to believe it. "We are here for the matter of Cox v. Ignacio," Judge Helen Kress announced, her voice flat and neutral as she looked over her docket. "Mr. Snyder, please begin with your client's petition." Robert Snyder, a man who looked like he'd been perpetually slicked down with cheap hair gel, stood up. He buttoned his shiny suit jacket, which strained slightly over his stomach. "Thank you, Your Honor," Snyder began, his voice booming with false sincerity. "We are here today to finalize the dissolution of the marriage between Mr. Gabriel Cox, a successful entrepreneur and pillar of his community, and Ms. Beverly Ignacio." He gestured vaguely toward Beverly, as if she were a piece of furniture. "Your Honor, this is a simple, straightforward case. Mr. Cox has been the sole provider for the entire duration of their 10-year union. He built a life for them from nothing. He provided the home. He provided the lifestyle. He provided the very funds Ms. Ignacio used for her personal expenses and hobbies." Beverly's jaw tightened, but her expression remained serene. Hobbies. And what was Ms. Ignacio's contribution? Snyder continued, turning to pace in front of the judge. "Regrettably, Your Honor, nothing." The word echoed in the quiet room. It was Greg's favorite word for her. Nothing. Beverly felt Lena Benton's hand rest gently on her forearm, a silent "stay calm." Ms. Ignacio was by definition a dependent, a homemaker who in the last few years ceased even to manage the home. She offered no financial contribution, no emotional support, and as Mr. Cox will testify, she became a drain on the marital assets and his own well-being. Greg nodded gravely, putting on a performance of a deeply wounded man. "Therefore, Your Honor," Snyder said, moving in for the kill, "we are petitioning for an equitable, which in this case means unequal distribution of assets. Mr. Cox, as the sole earner, petitions to retain the marital home on Willow Creek Drive, its contents, the 2024 BMW X7, and the recreational boat. Furthermore, given Ms. Ignacio's complete lack of employment history and her clear financial dependency, we believe his petition to not pay spousal support is more than generous. He simply wishes to be done with this entanglement." Snyder sat down, looking pleased with himself. Greg leaned over and patted him on the shoulder, whispering, Perfect. Judge Kress adjusted her glasses and looked at the petition. Her face was unreadable. She then turned her gaze to the other table. Ms. Benton, your response. Lena Benton stood up. She was tall, elegant, and radiated an aura of lethal competence. Your Honor, Lena said, her voice clear and cutting. My client, Ms. Beverly Ignacio, rejects Mr. Snyder's creative interpretation of the last 10 years. We reject his petition in its entirety, and we have filed a counter-petition. Snyder and Gregg both scoffed. A counter-petition. With what money? A counter-petition. Snyder stood up again, objecting. Your Honor, on what grounds? As her financial disclosures clearly state, Ms. Ignacio has no income. She has no assets in her name. She has been living in a small rented apartment for 18 months. She has no leverage, no claim, and frankly, this is a waste of the court's time. Gregg smirked, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms. He looked directly at Beverly. Tell me, Beverly, he mouthed silently, the disdain clear on his face. What are you going to do? You're nothing. Beverly met his gaze. The mask of calm didn't slip, but deep in her eyes a fire that had been banked for a decade began to glow. He thought this was his victory lap. He thought he was here to discard her and walk away clean. He had no idea that he wasn't in a courtroom. He was in an execution chamber, and he was the one on the block. The man Beverly was divorcing was not the man she had married. The Gregg she met in college was ambitious, yes, but he was also charming and she had thought supportive. He'd loved her mind. They were a team. He was the salesman, the ideas man. She was the strategist, the one who could see the entire board, not just the next move. She had an analytical mind that thrived on complex systems. They married young. She'd just received a modest inheritance from her grandmother, $60,000. Gregg had a vision for their future. Babe, real estate is the key, he'd said, spreadsheets open on his laptop. We use your 60 grand as a down payment on a house. It's an investment in our future. She'd agreed. The house on Willow Creek Drive. The deed, he explained, should be in his name only. It's just cleaner for the mortgage application, babe. My credit is a little better. We'll add you to the deed later, I promise. Later never came. For the first few years it was fine. She supported his ventures. He was always pivoting. First it was high-end coffee importing. Then it was a drop-shipping business for tactical gear. Then it was an app that was like Uber but for lawns. Each one failed, and each time Beverly was the one who would sit up until 3 a.m. untangling the accounting, placating angry vendors, and rewriting his business plans. She was his unpaid CFO, his strategist, and his admin. And he took all the credit when things went well and blamed her when they inevitably collapsed. You're just not thinking big enough, Beverly, he would shout, throwing her carefully prepared profit and loss statement onto the floor. This is small-time thinking. You're holding me back. Then she had her own idea. She had always been fascinated by logistics and efficiency. She saw a massive glaring hole in the sustainable tech market. A software solution for optimizing energy consumption in large-scale commercial buildings. It was complex, it was brilliant, and it was hers. She spent 6 months developing the code, writing the business plan, and building the wireframes. She was excited, truly excited, for the first time in years. She sat him down at their expensive dining room table. Gregg, she said, her hands trembling slightly as she opened her laptop. I have something to show you. I think this is it. This is the one. He listened for 5 minutes, a bored, impatient look on his face. When she finished, he didn't even look at her presentation. He just sighed a long, theatrical, "You're disappointing me" sigh. So, he said, steepling his fingers, you want to, what, sell building software, Beverly, honey? That's cute. It's a cute little hobby. It's not a hobby, Gregg. The projections are solid. I've already identified 3 potential. Who is going to buy this from you? He laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound. You're a housewife. You don't know the first thing about the tech world. That's my world. You stick to the house, okay? Stick to what you're good at." She felt the blood drain from her face. "What am I good at, Greg?" "Well," he said, getting up and patting her on the head like a dog. "You used to be good at supporting me. Lately, you're not even good at that. Honestly, Beverly, you've let yourself go. You're just not the woman I married." That was the night the marriage truly died. The final fatal blow came 6 months later, 18 months ago. She came home from the grocery store to find her suitcases on the porch. The locks had been changed. He opened the door, not even looking at her. Tiffany was visible over his shoulder, sitting on her sofa drinking her wine. "What's this, Greg?" Beverly asked, her voice shaking. "This is me moving on," he said, tossing a bank statement at her feet. "I've closed our joint account. I moved my money out. Don't worry, I left you your half of what was in there." She looked at the statement. The balance was $1,500. Her half was $750. 10 years of her life. $750. "My laptop," she whispered, her heart pounding. "My work. My plan." "Oh, that old thing," he said. "I tossed it. It was junk. Like I said, Beverly, you're just holding me back. You're nothing without me. Go be nothing somewhere else." He closed the door in her face. She stood on the porch for a full hour, catatonic. Then the chill of the evening air hit her. The fire wasn't out. It was just contained. He hadn't just kicked her out. He hadn't just stolen her money and her home. He had thrown away her work. He didn't know she had a backup. A cloud-based drive secured with 3-factor authentication. He had never been smart enough to find it. She took her $750, called an old friend from college, and slept on her couch for a week. The next Monday, she walked into a small venture capital firm called Pivot Ventures. She had no laptop, no fancy suit. Just her friend's borrowed tablet and a fire in her belly that could have melted steel. She walked out 3 hours later with $500,000 in seed funding. She rented a tiny apartment and a small windowless office that was more of a garage. She hired 2 brilliant young coders who didn't care that she wasn't a man in a Patagonia vest. They just cared about the genius of her platform. She named her company Aura Tech Solutions. For 18 months she worked. She didn't date. She didn't shop. She didn't watch TV. She worked 20-hour days. She coded, she pitched, she failed. She learned, she succeeded. She built an empire from the concrete floor of a garage fueled by coffee and a deep, simmering, righteous fury. She filed for divorce. Greg, hearing through the grapevine that she was struggling in a tiny apartment, had laughed and hired Robert Snyder to crush her. He assumed she'd crawl back. When she didn't, he got angry. His petition was designed to humiliate, to leave her with less than nothing, to prove his point. And Beverly, on the advice of her lawyer, Lena Benton, had let him. "Let him lie, Beverly." Lena had advised, her voice calm. "Let him build his entire case on the lie that you are nothing. Let him commit perjury. Let him say it in front of the judge. The higher the pedestal, the harder the fall." So Beverly had filed her financial disclosures. Income none. Assets none. It was technically the truth. She didn't have an income. She didn't own assets. The corporation did. A corporation he had no idea existed. "Your Honor," Robert Snyder said, standing up to address Lena Benton's simple counter-petition, "I am honestly baffled. Ms. Benton's claim that her client is entitled to 50% of the marital home is absurd." Judge Kress looked at him unamused. "She was his wife for 10 years, Mr. Snyder. The state of California is a community property state. Absurd is not a legal argument. Please elaborate." "Elaborate gladly," Snyder said, puffing himself up. "Community property implies a community, a partnership. Where was the partnership when Mr. Cox was working 80-hour weeks to secure the financing for his businesses? Where was the partnership when Ms. Ignacio was, well, We're not entirely sure what she was doing. Decorating shopping. Greg nodded, a solemn look on his face. I tried to get her involved. Your Honor, I really did. I'd come home wanting to talk strategy, and she'd be distant, uninterested. It was heartbreaking. Beverly's grip on her own hands tightened. Her knuckles were white. He was heartbroken. He who had called her life's work a cute hobby. The fact is, Snyder continued, Mr. Cox built his success alone. And now Ms. Ignacio, having contributed nothing to that success, seeks to unfairly profit from it. She is demanding spousal support. She is demanding half the house. A house I will remind the court that she was forcibly removed from 18 months ago. She has, by her own actions, abandoned the marriage. She was illegally locked out, Mr. Snyder, Lena Benton interjected coolly. A fact we have documented in the police report filed on that date. Snyder waved his hand dismissively. A domestic spat. Irrelevant. The point remains she has been living independently for a year and a half. She has clearly demonstrated an ability to survive. He said the word survive as if it were a dirty secret. And now, Snyder said, his voice rising, after all this time she comes to this court with her hand out demanding a reward for her failure as a wife. It is an insult to Mr. Cox. It is an insult to this court. Judge Kress scribbled a note. She looked at Beverly. Beverly just sat there, poised, calm, and silent. The judge's eyes narrowed slightly. She'd seen this before. The quiet ones were always the ones to watch. Mr. Cox, the judge said, addressing him directly. Greg sat up straighter. Yes, Your Honor. Your financial disclosure filed May 1st of this year. You list your occupation as entrepreneur consultant and your annual income as approximately $250,000. That's correct, Your Honor. This year has been exceptional, Greg said, beaming with pride. I see, the judge said. And you list your assets as the home on Willow Creek, the 2024 BMW, and a brokerage account with a balance of $45,000. Correct. And your debts? Just the mortgage, Your Honor. I run a tight ship, he said proudly. I see. Judge Kress looked down at Beverly's disclosure. And Ms. Ignacio, your filing lists your occupation as unemployed, your income as 0, and your assets as 0. That is what it says, Your Honor. Snyder cut in, unable to help himself. As I said, a clear-cut case. Mr. Snyder, I am perfectly capable of reading. The judge snapped her first show of impatience. I am speaking to Ms. Ignacio. Beverly looked at the judge. Yes, Your Honor. At the time of filing, that information was correct. Greg leaned over to Snyder. She's trapped. She signed it. It's perjury if she suddenly finds any money. He whispered it just loud enough for Beverly to hear. So, Ms. Ignacio, the judge continued, your husband, who claims an income of $250,000, is petitioning to give you nothing. And you, who claims an income of 0, are petitioning for half the house and spousal support. Is that the situation? Yes, Your Honor, Lena Benton said, standing. We believe that Mr. Cox's financial disclosures are incomplete, and that his characterization of my client's contribution to the marriage is not only false, but deliberately malicious. Objection, Snyder shouted. Malice. There is no malice here, only facts. The fact is, Mr. Cox is the success story. Ms. Ignacio is not. She is, for all intents and purposes, a non-entity. A nothing, as my client so colorfully put it in his deposition. Greg couldn't suppress his smirk. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, the picture of a dominant male asserting his territory. He looked at Beverly. It's true, he said, speaking directly to her, ignoring the judge. Beverly, just stop this. It's pathetic. You have nothing. You are nothing. Take the $10,000 I offered you to walk away and just go. Go be a secretary or something. Go find some other man to leech off of. You failed. It's over. The courtroom was silent. The bailiff shifted his hand, moving toward his hip. Lena Benton smiled a thin, dangerous smile. Robert Snyder's face paled. His client had just committed a massive, catastrophic error. Judge Kress slowly, deliberately took off her reading glasses. She stared at Gabriel Cox. She stared at him for 10 long, agonizing seconds. The silence was so profound that Beverly could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was no longer flat. It was arctic. "Mr. Cox," she said, "you just called your wife nothing. I mean, in a manner of speaking, Your Honor, a financial... You called her a leech. You told her to go be a secretary. You did this in my courtroom, while under oath." Greg's arrogance began to falter. He saw the shift. "Your Honor, I was just..." "Be quiet," the judge commanded. She turned her gaze from Greg to Beverly. The entire temperature of the room changed. The ice melted, replaced by a sudden jarring warmth. A warmth that looked like respect. Judge Kress looked down at the paperwork, then back up at Beverly. A look of dawning realization, of stunned connection crossed her face. "Ms. Benton," the judge said, her voice completely different. "The name of your client. It's Beverly Marie Ignacio, correct?" Lena Benton's smile widened. "Yes, Your Honor, it is." Greg and Snyder looked at each other confused. What did her middle name matter? Judge Kress turned her computer monitor slightly. She typed something. She clicked. She read. Her eyebrows shot up. She looked back at Beverly, not as a judge to a defendant, but as one professional to another. "Forgive me," the judge said, and the entire room gasped. A judge. Apologizing. "I've been buried in municipal bond cases all week." Judge Kress said, a small, awestruck laugh in her voice. "I haven't been keeping up with the financial news as I should." She turned to Beverly, her voice filled with unmistakable deference. "Madam CEO," she said, "I must say it is an honor to have you in my courtroom. I just read the feature on Oratech in the Wall Street Journal." The words Madam CEO hung in the air, vibrating with power. Gabriel Cox's smirk froze, then shattered. His face went through a rapid, comical series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, and then a dawning, sickly panic. "What?" Greg whispered, his voice cracking. "What did she say?" Robert Snyder was already fumbling for his phone, his hands shaking as he tried to type Oratech into a search engine. His face, already pale, went the color of old parchment. "Oh no," Snyder breathed. In the back row, Tiffany Shaw's smug grin had vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed, vacant stare. "Your Honor, I don't understand," Greg stammered, looking at the judge. "CEO, she's unemployed. She put it on the form." Judge Kress ignored him, her entire focus on Beverly. "The acquisition by Nexus Industries," the judge continued, as if they were the only two people in the room. $800 million. That is astounding. Your software platform is revolutionary. My son-in-law is in commercial real estate. He says your Aura system is changing the entire industry. He says it's trimming energy costs by 40%. He calls it the new standard. Beverly finally allowed herself a small, polite smile. She inclined her head. "Your Honor is very kind. We've been fortunate. It was a lot of hard work." "Madam CEO," Greg said again, louder this time. He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "What is this? What is this joke, Beverly? Tell them! Tell them! It's a lie." "Mr. Cox, sit down," the bailiff barked. "No, she's lying," he yelled, pointing a trembling finger at Beverly. She's nothing. She lived in a garage. She's unemployed. This is a trick." Lena Benton stood up, calm as a glacier. Your Honor, if Mr. Cox and his counsel had bothered to do even the most basic due diligence, or perhaps read a newspaper, they would know. But my client was not technically lying on her disclosure. How is this not a lie? Snyder shrieked, finding his voice. He held up his phone, the screen showing the Forbes landing page. The headline, From Zero to Hero, How Beverly Ignacio Built a Billion-Dollar Tech Empire in 18 Months. Right below it was a picture of Beverly, not in the simple linen dress she wore today, but in a sleek, powerful dark blue suit standing in a vast sunlit atrium. She looked like a queen. It says here, billion. Snyder whispered, his own legal career flashing before his eyes. As I said, counsel, Lena continued, Ms. Ignacio filed her disclosure on May 1st. At that time, she was not unemployed. She was the founder and CEO of a private corporation, Aura Tech Solutions. She drew no salary. Her income was zero. She owned no personal assets. Her assets, 100% of the company stock, were held in a blind trust managed by the firm of Latham & Watkins. She lived off a modest stipend from the corporation, as advised by her financial team to minimize personal tax exposure during the acquisition phase. Lena walked forward and placed a new, much heavier file on the judge's bench. The acquisition by Nexus Industries, Your Honor, closed 2 days ago, Lena announced, for a final sale Cox of $850 million. After capital gains tax and paying her investors, my client's personal liquid net worth is approximately $612 million. Clack. The sound was Robert Snyder's phone slipping from his nerveless fingers and hitting the table. Greg Cox made a small choking sound. He sank back into his chair, his eyes wide and vacant. He looked at Beverly, but he wasn't seeing the woman he'd abused. He was seeing a ghost. He was seeing a number. 612,000. 600, he mouthed. Judge Kress looked through the file, her expression grim. Ms. Benton, this is an extraordinary development. And Mr. Snyder, your client's petition is based on a, shall we say, a profound misrepresentation of reality. But, Your Honor, Snyder sputtered, we were not informed. This is a deception. She hid these assets. Excuse me, counselor. Lena's voice was sharp steel. Did I hide them, or did your client build his entire case on a fantasy born of his own arrogance? My client was under no obligation to correct his delusional narrative. He called her nothing. He insisted she contributed nothing. We simply waited for him to say it under oath in a court of law. Lena turned to Greg. You said you were the ideas man, Mr. Cox. The entrepreneur. It's funny we have your tax returns for the last 10 years. Your ventures have a cumulative net loss of $1.3 million. My client, Madam CEO, built an $850 million company in 18 months from a garage using the business plan you threw in the trash. Greg was breathing hard, hyperventilating. The color had drained from his face, leaving a pasty grayish tint. You, he stammered, pointing at Beverly. You stole from me. That idea, that was my idea. Beverly let out a single sharp laugh. It was the first sound she'd made, and it cut through the room like a scalpel. Your idea, Greg, she said, her voice clear and strong. You told me it was a cute hobby. You said, and I quote, "Who is going to buy this from you?" She stood up, walking slowly toward the center of the courtroom. She felt no fear. She felt no chill. All she felt was the righteous burning heat of the fire she had nurtured. You called me a leech, Greg, but who was really the leech who took my $60,000 inheritance, who put my house in his name, who lived off my unpaid labor for 10 years while his businesses bled us dry? She turned to the judge. Your Honor, Mr. Cox's financial disclosures are not just incomplete, they are fraudulent. What? Snyder yelped. My legal team, which I assure you is significantly more competent than Mr. Snyder, conducted a forensic audit of Mr. Cox's finances. The exceptional $250,000 income he claimed, it's not from consulting. Lena Benton handed another file to the judge. 3 months ago, Beverly continued, sensing that this divorce was coming, Mr. Cox liquidated $250,000 from a joint brokerage account, an account he forgot to disclose to the court, and one he illegally locked me out of. He transferred it to a private account in the Cayman Islands, an account in the name of Ms. Tiffany Shaw. In the back row, Tiffany let out a small squeak. He wasn't building a business, Your Honor, Beverly said, her voice ringing with power. He was stealing. He stole from me. Just like he stole my home. Just like he stole my work. She stopped directly in front of Greg's table. He cowered, looking up at her like she was a goddess of vengeance. You called me nothing, she said, her voice low and dangerous. You built your case on it. You perjured yourself on it. You're right, Greg. I am nothing. I am nothing like you. And I am done. Judge Kress's face was a thundercloud. She stared at the documents Lena Benton had provided, the offshore bank transfers, the deed to the house with the original down payment receipt from Beverly's inheritance, the sworn affidavits from Greg's business partners, confirming he had in fact contributed nothing but hot air. Mr. Snyder, the judge said, her voice lethally quiet. You have 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't hold both you and your client in contempt of court for filing a fraudulent disclosure. And for perjury. Robert Snyder looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. He was stammering, shuffling papers, his professional veneer completely dissolved. Your Honor, we were operating on the information provided my client. Mr. Cox, he assured me. He assured you, Judge Kress thundered, her voice suddenly booming. Did he assure you that he was committing felony bank fraud? Did he assure you that he was hiding marital assets offshore? Or were you just so excited to humiliate an unemployed woman that you failed to do your job? Snyder went silent. He slowly sat down, a defeated, ruined man. All eyes turned to Greg. He was sweating profusely, his expensive Zegna suit suddenly looking cheap and ill-fitting. His face was a mask of sheer, unadulterated terror. Beverly, babe, please. He whispered, his voice hoarse. Listen, we can fix this. We can talk. It was a misunderstanding. I always supported you. I was testing you. Beverly stared at him, her expression unyielding. Testing me? You threw my life in the trash, Greg. You locked me out. You called me nothing. I was stressed. He yelled, his desperation making him erratic. The pressure, I built us that life. You owe me that company. That idea. You had it while we were married. That's marital property. It's half mine. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. He had just made his final fatal mistake. Half yours, Lena Benton repeated, stepping forward. Mr. Cox, you truly are magnificent. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Exhibit D. This is the original business plan for Auratech Solutions dated 2 years ago. And right here is the email chain where my client presented it to Mr. Cox. She put the printouts on the projector. The entire court could read Greg's response. This is cute, Beverly. A cute little hobby. Stick to what you're good at. This is my world. And, Lena continued, we have the affidavit from Mr. Cox signed when he kicked my client out of her home, stating that he was solemnly and completely dissolving their partnership and that any future hobbies or debts she incurred were hers and hers alone. He had his own lawyer draft it to avoid liability for her future failures. He signed it. He emancipated himself from her business. Lena smiled. Your Honor, Mr. Cox didn't just reject the business, he disowned it. He legally severed himself from it in writing. He cannot now in good faith claim community property on an asset he declared, and I quote, worthless. He wanted no part of her failure. Well, he gets no part of her success. Greg Cox stopped breathing. He understood. He had, in his own arrogant attempt to protect himself from her debt, signed away his claim to a billion-dollar empire. But the house, he sputtered, grasping at straws. The house is in my name. She has no claim. The house, Beverly said, her voice like ice, was purchased with a $60,000 down payment from my inheritance. A fact we have the bank transfer to prove. He put his name on the deed and promised to add mine later. He never did. He then proceeded to use the house as collateral for his failed businesses, taking out 3 separate mortgages against its value mortgages he used to pay for Ms. Shaw's apartment and a new Maserati. You can't prove that, Greg shrieked. We can, Lena said. We have the loan applications, and we have the bank statements from Ms. Shaw's account showing the deposits. Which, by the way, she will now be liable for, as she was a knowing participant in the fraudulent conveyance of marital assets. I believe the term for her legally is co-conspirator. In the back row, Tiffany Shaw burst into tears. I didn't know. He told me it was his money. It wasn't, Beverly said. It was our money, and he stole it. The full picture was now clear to everyone in the room. This wasn't a divorce. This was the unmasking of a con man. He hadn't just been a bad husband. He had been a thief. He had tried to systematically destroy her, drain her, and leave her for dead. He had miscalculated one thing. She refused to die. Judge Helen Kress had seen a lot of ugly divorces. She had seen liars, cheats, and monsters. But the sheer calculated and arrogant fraud perpetrated by Gabriel Cox set a new standard. She looked at him. He was no longer a man. He was a puddle. He was weeping openly, snot and tears running down his face. Please, Your Honor, don't ruin me. I'll give her the house. I'll give her whatever she wants, Beverly. Please, I love you. I've always loved you. Beverly just shook her head, a look of profound, weary disgust on her face. No, Greg. You never loved me. You loved what I did for you. You loved having someone to clean up your messes. You loved having someone to blame. You loved having someone to feel superior to. Your greatest terror wasn't that I would fail. It was that I would succeed. She turned back to the judge. Your Honor, we are no longer asking for 50% of the house. We are no longer asking for spousal support. Greg's head snapped up, a wild, desperate hope in his eyes. Instead, Beverly continued, we are demanding the following. 1. The immediate court-ordered sale of the property on Willow Creek. 2. We demand 100% of the proceeds from that sale as reimbursement for the initial stolen inheritance and the subsequent fraudulent loans taken against it. 3. We demand the immediate liquidation and seizure of the $45,000 brokerage account and the $250,000 hidden in the Cayman account. 4. We demand Mr. Cox be held responsible for 100% of my client's legal fees, which, given the team of forensic accountants we had to hire from Cox Waterhouse Coopers, are substantial. 5. We demand a permanent restraining order. And finally, we demand the court refer Mr. Cox to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution on charges of perjury and felony fraud. Each demand was a nail in Greg's coffin. He was shaking, his sobs turning into high-pitched, desperate wheezing. No, you can't. Judge Kress looked at the requests. She looked at the mountain of evidence. She picked up her gavel. Mr. Cox, she said, her voice ringing with judicial finality. You walked into this courtroom today under the assumption that you were the victim. You portrayed your wife as a nothing, a leech, and a failure. You did this, it seems, to conceal your own staggering history of financial and emotional abuse and to cover for your own criminal actions. Your Honor, please. Snyder tried, rising weakly. Sit down, counselor. You'll get your chance to speak at your own disbarment hearing. Snyder collapsed back into his chair. The court finds, Judge Kress announced, that Mr. Gabriel Cox has willfully and maliciously defrauded this court. He has committed perjury. He has hidden assets. He has for a decade systematically exploited his wife, Ms. Beverly Ignacio. The sheer scale of his deceit is matched only by the scale of his arrogance. She looked at Beverly, her expression softening. And Ms. Ignacio, Madam CEO, Your resilience is matched only by your brilliance. This court is in awe of what you have built." The judge turned back to Greg. The hammer was about to fall. On the matter of Cox v. Ignacio, I rule as follows. 1. The petition for divorce is granted. 2. Mr. Cox's petition for assets and his motion to deny spousal support are denied, in their entirety. 3. Ms. Ignacio's counter-petition is granted, in its entirety. 4. The house on Willow Creek is to be sold immediately with 100% of the proceeds awarded to Ms. Ignacio. 5. All disclosed and undisclosed bank accounts belonging to Mr. Cox, including the Cayman account, are to be seized and turned over to Ms. Ignacio as partial damages. 6. Mr. Cox will be responsible for all of Ms. Ignacio's legal fees, the sum of which will be determined by her counsel. 7. A permanent restraining order is granted. Mr. Cox is to stay 500 yards away from Ms. Ignacio, her home, and her place of business. The judge paused, then hit the gavel. Bang! "And finally," she said, looking at the bailiff, "Officer, please take Mr. Cox into custody. He is in contempt of court, and I am referring this entire case and Ms. Shaw's involvement to the DA for immediate criminal investigation." "No!" Greg screamed, a primal sound of utter ruin. "No! Beverly, you can't do this. You ruined me, you be—" The bailiff was on him, cuffing his hands behind his back before he could finish the word. "You have the right to remain silent, Mr. Cox." As they dragged him weeping and screaming from the courtroom, his eyes met Beverly's. She didn't look triumphant. She didn't look angry. She just looked free. The echo of Gabriel Cox's final animalistic scream seemed to stain the air long after he was dragged from the room. Then a profound, heavy silence settled over courtroom 3B. It was the silence of a bomb detonated the moments after the shock wave has passed, when all that remains is the settling dust and the ringing in your ears. Beverly sat perfectly still. She took a breath. It was the first one that didn't feel constricted. The first one that seemed to reach all the way to the bottom of her lungs in over a decade. It was shaky. It was deep. It was the breath of a woman who had just surfaced after being held underwater for a very, very long time. Across the room, Robert Snyder hadn't moved. He was staring at the table, his hands flat on its surface, his face the color of spoiled milk. He looked like a statue memorializing the exact moment of his career's death. In the back row, the court officer was speaking in a low, firm voice to Tiffany Shaw, whose sobs were a wet, pathetic counter-rhythm to the courtroom's heavy quiet. "Yes, ma'am, you'll need to come with us. You have the right to an attorney." Beverly closed her eyes for just a second. She didn't feel triumph. She didn't feel joy. Not yet. What she felt was quiet. The buzzing, high-frequency anxiety that had been her constant companion for years had suddenly been switched off. The cold she had entered with was gone, replaced by a simple, neutral warmth. It was over. It was truly, finally over. Lena Benton began to slowly, methodically place her documents back into her briefcase. The quiet snick of the clasps locking shut was the only sound. She turned to Beverly, a small, brilliant smile touching the corners of her mouth. "Well?" Lena said, her voice pitched for Beverly alone. "I'd say that went well." A small laugh, almost a gasp, escaped Beverly's lips. "You were brilliant, Lena. Absolutely brilliant." "You were the brilliant one, Beverly," Lena replied, her eyes sharp and full of respect. "All I did was present the truth you uncovered. You're the one who lived it. And you're the one who built the empire while living it." She paused, shaking her head as she glanced at Snyder's catatonic form. "To be honest, I've never had an opposing counsel do my job for me. Greg's entire case was a signed confession. His arrogance, it was a thing to behold. He wrote our closing argument for us every time he opened his mouth." "He was always his own worst enemy," Beverly said, her voice quiet. "He just needed a big enough stage to prove it." She stood up, her legs feeling surprisingly steady. She smoothed the front of her simple linen dress, a conscious grounding gesture. She was the same woman who had walked in this morning. And yet she was not. She would never be that woman again. As she and Lena turned to leave, Judge Kress was stepping down from the bench. She had removed her black robe, and in a simple blouse and skirt, she looked less like an icon of the law and more like a woman who had just finished a very, very difficult day at work. She stopped waiting for Beverly. "Ms. Ignacio," the judge said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, her hand warm. Beverly shook it. "Judge Kress, thank you for hearing me." "Don't thank me," the judge said, her expression softening with a mixture of professional admiration and personal sympathy. "You gave me the evidence. I just read the verdict. I see too many cases like this, Ms. Ignacio. Too many men like your ex-husband. They tear down, they diminish, they gaslight. They count on their victims being too broken to fight back." The judge held her gaze. "It is a rare and profound privilege to see justice so categorically served. What you did, building that company from the ashes he left you in, it's more than an inspiration." "I just did what I had to do to survive," Beverly said softly, the words feeling truer than ever. "You did more than survive, Madam CEO," the judge said, a respectful, knowing smile appearing on her face. "You conquered. Good luck to you." With a final appreciative nod, Beverly and Lena walked through the heavy wooden doors and into the marble hallway. If the courtroom was the quiet after the storm, the hallway was the storm itself. A wall of noise, light, and bodies hit them. Reporters who had clearly been alerted by someone inside scrambled, microphones and phones thrust forward like weapons. The flash of cameras was a blinding, non-stop strobe. "Ms. Ignacio Beverly, is it true your husband was arrested for fraud? Madam CEO, what's next for Oratech? How does it feel to win? Is it true you're worth nearly $1 billion? What do you have to say to your ex-husband?" Beverly faltered, her hand instinctively coming up to shield her eyes. This was new. This was terrifying. This was the part of her new life she hadn't prepared for. Lena put a steadying hand on her back, but before she could be overwhelmed, a broad, solid figure in a black suit materialized at her side. "This way, Madam CEO," a deep, calm voice said. It was Frank, her driver and head of her new security detail. He was an ex-Secret Service agent whom her board had insisted on hiring, and she had thought it was overkill. She suddenly deeply appreciated his presence. He didn't push. He didn't shove. He simply existed, a human shield creating a path of calm in the center of the chaos. He gently guided Beverly through the throng, Lena following in their wake. Beverly kept her head high. She didn't answer any questions. She didn't smile. She didn't scowl. She just walked, her focus on the glass doors at the end of the hall. She was a CEO, and this was just another more aggressive boardroom. They burst through the doors onto the courthouse steps, the chaos multiplying. But Frank was already moving, opening the back door of a black gleaming Maybach that was parked illegally, but no one was ticketing it, right at the curb. Beverly paused, turning to Lena. "Thank you, Lena, for everything." "The pleasure was all mine, Beverly," Lena smiled. "Go. Run your empire. I'll send you the final invoice. It will be substantial." Beverly laughed, a real, genuine laugh. "Send it. I imagine I can cover it." She slid into the plush, cream-colored leather of the Maybach. Frank closed the door. The thunk was immediate. It was absolute. The sound of a vault ceiling. The screaming, the questions, the flashing lights. All of it was instantly muted, reduced to a silent, frantic pantomime on the other side of the tinted, soundproof glass. The silence that enveloped her was absolute. It smelled of rich leather and polished wood. The car pulled away from the curb smoothly, silently. Beverly didn't look in the rearview mirror. She turned and looked out the side window at the courthouse as they turned the corner. She watched the grand stone building, the tombstone of her old life, recede until it was just another block of granite in a busy city. She was free. Greg had called her nothing. He had tried to leave her with nothing, with less than nothing. He had locked her out in the cold with $750 and a world of pain. She thought of that woman, the one who stood on the porch shivering, her entire world shattered. That woman was gone. She had been burned away in the forge of 20-hour workdays in the code she had written, until her fingers cramped in the terror of pitching to venture capitalists, and in the cold, hard satisfaction of building a thing that worked. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was a clean, cold, quiet sense of purpose. She turned away from the window and faced forward. She picked up her phone. It was buzzing, not with texts of congratulations or news alerts about her divorce. She'd muted those. It was a calendar notification. 2:00 p.m. board meeting, Nexus Industries, Global Integration Strategy Phase 2. She tapped the notification and opened her secure server. Her screen lit up, illuminating her face, and it was not the face of a victim. It was the face of a commander. She wasn't reading headlines about her past. She was analyzing real-time performance dashboards for her software, already strategizing her next move. Greg had forgotten one crucial thing. When you have nothing, you have nothing to lose. And when you have nothing to lose, you are free to build everything. The car sped silently toward the downtown skyline, carrying Beverly Ignacio away from the ashes of her past and toward the empire she had built. She was no longer just Beverly. She was, in every sense of the word, Madam CEO. The gavel has fallen, and the truth has been revealed. Gabriel Cox thought he was silencing a nothing housewife, but he was actually trying to defraud one of the most powerful new CEOs in the country. Karma, as they say, always has a way of finding the right address. Beverly built an empire from the ashes of a cruel marriage, proving that the best revenge isn't just living well, it's building a billion-dollar company and watching your abuser get hauled away in handcuffs. What do you think of this incredible story of justice? Do you think Greg got what he deserved? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you love stories where arrogance is shattered and the underdog rises, make sure you like this video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to the channel for more true life drama. Don't miss what's coming next.